The color of today is blue for the throat chakra. Divine Rise, blessed be to your day. Of course, may it be everything you desire to create everything you desire. Today is Wednesday. You've been rocking. You know, it's winning the day. In order to win the day, you must understand the night before, the darkness before. I've talked about it before. We've gotten into it before. When we talked about emotional literacy, emotional intelligence is emotional literacy. Everything is a byproduct of our emotions down in this space. So I remember one time I talked before about the bank, the production, and the consumer. Now remember, everything outside of you is an aspect of you for experience or observation. Remember Monday we talked about you got to accept those. You have to come to a point, because this is one of the top questions that I'm always asked. You got to come yourself to the point to where you are forfeiting your reactions to the judgments so you can be triggered, so you can initiate that process. It does me no good to sit in it. Like, give an example. It does no good for me to work out or do all of these things if I'm not accepting the tests that come with it. So if I go to my job and I say I'm the best at my job, damn sure believe you're gonna get tested. Whatever it is, that challenge, that judgment, that's that test, that's that lesson. It brings us into the space that we need. And it made me think about emotional bankruptcy, the ultimate aspects of accountability. Think of the subconscious as the bank. I'm gonna break down how I hope you understand how the bank works. Think about the subconscious as the bank. Your thoughts are the production team, making them beats or making whatever, and your emotions are the consumer. Remember, because you eat with your emotions. So take those three aspects and then think about how the bank works. The bank takes in the memories, takes in the thoughts, takes in whatever it only can produce based on what the emotions have able to assess. So if I'm in this one state, I got a story to go with this therapy session. If my emotions are what form the behavioral aspect of myself, my pattern, my habit, and remember, there's the two emotions, fear, love. Love is the happiness, peace, the gratitude aspect. And then fear is anger, sadness, grief, guilt, all those aspects, the negative aspects that create the wounds. Greetings. So if I'm sitting in a space and I have consumed negative, or what I would call potentially negative or bad memories. If I have bad memories on the table, my subconscious is the bank that takes account for all of that. My subconscious is the bank, and it ensures every negative thought. It ensures every negative experience 250 grand. So now think about your thoughts as that $250,000 insurance policy that's taken out on your memories. So now think about 250,000 thoughts that are formed from every bad memory. So now think about your emotions. Your emotions, you consume with your emotions. So if my memories locked into that negative, into those aspects that I have not assessed, then I open up an account. That's the thought. I honor this thought. Now I have to ask myself, which leads to the story time. I was thinking about it while I was on my walk, my walkie run. found another path, almost slipped and busted my ass. But it was a part of the process of running through the park when it was rain, when it was wet in that space. I've often talked about the aspects with my this healing process, and I talked about the aspects of the seeking forgiveness from my mother. Until I understood what seeking forgiveness from my mother, until I understood what forgiveness was, when I was seeking for forgiveness, it was based upon this owing something. So like, I wanted my mother to tell me why she said this. Why did she take this money from me when I was little? Why did she say I was an accident? And one thing that stuck with me a lot of the time, one of the biggest ones that stuck with me, is my mother calling me an accident when she was angry. So that created an account in my mind as an accident. So now this account is now open. This account is automatically in the negative. That means no matter what I put into this account, every time I get a notification about that account being in the negative, I have to understand what the notification was. So every time my mom would call me and say, I need a ride here, I need this, and then would say I needed a ride, and the undertone would always be this aspect of guilt or whatever it was. I'm still feeding off of that guilt aspect because I'm now stuck in this guilt wound because mother said I was an accident, means I messed up a life, it's my fault. I'm stuck in that space. So every time, I remember this one time in particular, I was like, Mom, I gotta go to work at 1 o'clock, so I'm gonna come to the house around 8. My mom said, okay. Up until this point, I never really even thought about it. Up until this point, okay. I get to my mom's house around 7:30. Always, it's something weird with me doing that. Got to my mom's house around 7:30. Sat outside, just waiting, listening. I'm like choosing what songs, what playlists to play, because my mom listened to certain songs, but like, I can't believe you listening to that. Neither here nor there. But now I'm sitting in this space and it's 8 o'clock. My mom didn't text me. My mom didn't call me because this is after my mom got the smartphone. Mom didn't text me. Mom didn't call me. So I'm like, all right, it's 8:15. Let me go up to the door. Maybe she's still getting ready. Maybe she don't know I'm outside. I walk inside. Pop's sitting on the couch watching his TVN. My Pops was a super Catholic. And I'm like, he was like, hey, what you doing here? I was supposed to take Mom to the grocery store. My mom was like, my Pops was like, she left with your aunt earlier. I'm like, but I said I'd be here at 8. And I dwelled on this thought. I was like, I remember getting back in my car, this point of reaction, asking my mother like, hey, what happened? She was like, you said you had to be at work and this, and this. And I didn't want to, I was like, Mom, I said I had to be at work at 1. I'll take you at 8. So later on, not assessing the account, not even thinking about it. Later on, my mom calls me and was like, I still need a ride to the store. I was like, I thought you went to the store with my aunt. She was like, yeah, but she was rushing me in all these aspects. So this is feeding my guilt. Unconsciously, this is feeding my guilt. So I'm like, well, I'm at work now. I get off. I'm off tomorrow, so I'll take you tomorrow. Come back by the house. I was like, Mom, you pick the time. What time you want me to come by? She was like, come around 10. Mom calls me. I show up around 10. Go to the house. Show up around 10. Duran. Show up around 10. My mom does the same thing. Now I'm upset. Now I'm already upset, but now I'm like, why does this keep happening? Then it made me really think about that account. This negative account, because every time I would call my mother and say what happened, she would guilt trip me. The reaction to whatever I said was based on the avoidance, and then she would guilt trip me. So now I'm in this cycle of this guilt trip with my mother. The account's open. This account is now open. This thought form is now open. So now, using this same account, I want y'all to really understand this. Using this same account, now if my mom called me, I called myself, hey mom, if you need something from the store, call me, let me know, text me the list, let me know what you need from the store and I'll bring it by. My mom didn't call me for a couple of weeks. Yeah. You're not honoring that energy exchange. So I'm sitting there in the space, I'm like, all right, cool. So now I do this a couple of times. Now I'm doing this a couple of times. And so now my mom is still in the space. This account's still open. So I'm still consuming based on these emotions. My thoughts are still in this negative space. They're still in this negative space of that guilt. So now I'm trying to transfer the guilt onto my mother by saying, hey, when you call me, send me a list. I'm not thinking about the tone. I'm not thinking about the emotions or the intentions to the condition. I'm trying to avoid the guilt. I'm not trying to close out this account or understand this account. This guilt wound was deeper than that aspect. So now I go to that. So I take my mom the food to the house. My mom still, later on, still comes back out, hey, can you take me to the store next time? Because I needed this, this, and this. I didn't want to. She was trying to keep me in this guilt complex. Whether she was doing it consciously or unconsciously, that does not matter. This is the one thing you must understand about what we talked about Monday, that suspension of judgment or suspension of the emotional intelligence in order to avoid the judgment. That is so fucking important when it comes to doing this internal work. You are now reanimating the learning of the emotional intelligences. That's that why. That's going to require that judgment. This is how you start creating that boundary and not that barrier. See, I was still trying to create a barrier because I was still in this space of guilt from my mother, thinking my mother owed me something. So either way, I'm manipulating the situation. So now I took manipulation from her and I'm manipulating back. Now I'm in this false sense of control. I'm in the false sense of control. But guess what? Now I create another account based on that. Remember, I'm still pulling from that account. That account getting hit with $35 overdraft fees every fucking week. So I got to keep feeding that emotional aspect. Remember, we talked about yesterday the difference between obsession and focus. So now my obsession, which is fed by that thought or the result of that thought, which is the new emotional attachment. Now I'm in spaces, overgiving in this space or undergiving. Since I'm undergiving in this space, to find balance, I got to overgive in this space. Exactly. Exactly. We don't get into that too. But now I'm looking at the space and I'm like, okay. Now I got to create another. Now I got to open up another account. Now I got to open up another account to keep myself balanced. This account's negative. I can't do nothing with it. It ain't been reported yet. But now I have to think about it. How many of these accounts have I opened? Now, until I came to the point of accepting my mother's answer, and exactly, Johnny Mac came in writing that my mother was conscious to a point of understanding the influence under the identity that was created based in that space. Think about that narrative of family forever, and your family do you dirty and all that. Think about all of these negative anotones that are connected to that I connected to that account. So now in that space, now when I accept her answer, I forgive her because I'm learning to forgive myself in that self-assessment. I'm becoming receptive in that space. Go check out that video in my story for my TikTok. Now that I'm sitting in that space of reflection, I now understand that it doesn't matter how that account was opened. It's more important for me to assess to close that account out. See, a lot of the accounts that we have opened that are in a negative balance, a lot of the accounts that we have opened that are in these negative balances, these negative accounts, because you're not forgiving yourself. Think about the bank. The government gives banks loan forgiveness all the fucking time. You're not forgiving yourself. You're not accepting it. You're not going through the process. You're not sitting in the presence of saying, damn, I made a lot. I spent a lot of money out of a negative account. That responsibility I'm consuming based on these negatives, sitting in that, this is emotional presence. This is accountability. Because when you look inside of my space, there was so many opportunities for me to have learned that in my space. All of the relationships, the friendships, the trauma bonds, everything that I connected to was based on that, only based on that negative account. It was based on that negative account. Everything that I did was based off of a negative account. Yeah. You never know. That's exact. That you never know when you gonna need somebody. You never go. Think about how that feeds into your subconscious. It's feeding a negative account anyway. Those types of things. Those are the dings and the notifications that keep hitting you. Every time you have that emotional trigger, that's letting you know, yo, you got an account you ain't checked out. Your account balance is low. Your account balance is low. I wouldn't go do that. But you find it, but you want to go, I'm going to go find a way. See, that emotional intelligence is your financial literacy. If I don't understand my emotional, if I don't have an understanding of my emotions, then I'm be stuck in that reaction, then my financial actions are going to be in that same space. I'm always going to set my tone to the negative account, trying to refill this account. That account cannot be refilled. You're not going to bring that account to balance until you go through the process of let me seek that forgiveness. That's that emotional bankruptcy. Y'all remember that? Y'all remember back in the day when back in the early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. I don't know if it was early in the 90s, but y'all remember that the white dude would come on TV talking about the $99 down for bankruptcy, and you can file for bankruptcy, and you're like, oh shit, bankruptcy. And then you were given an undertone that bankruptcy was bad, but you didn't understand there was different chapters to bankruptcy. All bankruptcy in a nutshell is if you have a number of accounts that you can't maintain, all of these accounts are now shut off. All of them are put under that bankruptcy. So you think about it but you were told in the physical aspect, bankruptcies on your account and repos and all of these aspects. How about the next level of that? You know, you can suppress those. You can actually make those so they don't exist. This is the equivalent to you doing that internal work. See, when I started assessing those old negative accounts, I was filing for bankruptcy. I was taking responsibility, taking my accountability of what I was consuming in that space with those accounts. I was taking that accountability for myself. Closing out these accounts, allowing them to go into that space. Allowing myself to feel those emotions inside of that space. That way, as I move forward later on, I was like, wait, you mean I can make sure that, so every time the credit report, credit bureau, my subconscious tries to pull those thoughts back up, I've already dealt with them, so I can, even in myself, now I can remove them, point by point, just remove them. And now my emotions are now because I'm learning that emotional intelligence, everything outside of you magnifies. Everything outside of you is magnifying what needs to be taken care of. Everything outside of you is going to make that magnification. How are you seeing it and how am I reacting to it based on that negative account, well, I did this here and I did this here and I did this here. One of the 48 laws of power is to be negative in every, you are negative in every space. That means you are receptive in every space. Now think about this aspect of you being negative or receptive or emotionally present in every space. That means you are there for the trigger to happen. You're there for that shit to hit you. You're there for that moment so you can start assessing it. If I'm inside of every space and I'm understanding that I'm receptive in that space, that means I'm vulnerable inside. I need to accept vulnerability inside of that space. Now it can take me into a point of reflection and assessment. That brings me into my level, that helps me tap into my awareness. And now I get to see the opportunity, because the opportunity is within my boundary. See, when we think about boundaries, when most people think about boundaries, we're actually thinking about barriers. The boundary allows things to filter through. One of the visualizations that I used to use when I was creating boundaries is my boundary, it allows things to filter through. It allows information to filter through. That barrier, it blocks everything out. So if I'm in this mode of, I'm looking at the bad, which is negative, which serves me a purpose, that's going to serve me a purpose to learn something, then I'm only looking at the positives based on my conditions from that negative account, then automatically every time that I'm challenged about my standard or how to move forward, of course, because of quality versus quantity, and my emotions are still consuming from that negative, in my thought process, I'll create a barrier. That's the emotional avoidance. That's me staying emotionally relevant. That's when I'm more susceptible to taking, my barrier deflects. The barrier deflects. So every time that I'm projecting into a space, I'm building that deflection, I create a barrier. So everything in front of me is now an obstacle, stopping me from getting to what I want. Go all the way back. Remember, I talk about it all the time. Go all the way back into that room. 9 times out of 10, once you sit there and really look at yourself, go all the way back to that itty bitty room in the darkness, way back in the darkness, and you sitting back there, that you are still sitting back there in the room, waiting for somebody to tell you to come out and eat, and you're still battling with you're not being able to play. That is your inner child. The echoes from the things that we don't assess back there, they sitting back there with all the negative shit. The only thing that comes up here is the adolescent or the id or the identity that comes into this current space. That emotional intelligence, where it happened, I always say this, where that shit happened, where that event happened, if you have the regret, the guilt, the doubt, the insecurity in that space. When I had that doubt, that insecurity in that space with my mother and that aptitude of what happened, and me not understanding how to seek forgiveness, not based on for her, but for myself, and accepting her answer, and accepting that her answer is coming from her own lust of reactions. I couldn't close out that account. I could never close out that account. I'm sitting there with that account wide open. And I'm wondering why now I'm sitting there wondering why my mother, I'm wondering why I'm always triggered by things that my mother does. Even though I told her this, I can go back and forth. I told my mom about this, and I told my dad about this, told my brother about this, I told my sister about this, told them about this. It don't matter what you tell them. You're using an overdrawn emotional account. You are keeping yourself in a state of emotional bankruptcy because of that wound, because of that aspect. Remember, we talked about it, you keep creating everything that you create based on being this eternal validation for your conditions. Everything that I created based on the external condition, I was in a codependent manifestation. That means the only reason that it existed, that I thought I was happy, is because something was in my space. Something understood my story. So I naturally became obsessed with the things that were listening to my story, or that would listen to me, that would tell me that it's not my fault. But when it came time to motherfuckers, when my OG, the niggas like, hey, nigga, it is your fault. Nigga, you gotta take accountability for your actions. Learning that from the underworld aspect when I was around my father's side of the family. That shit hit me. I'm like, oh shit, nigga. It's not about the fault as in me feeling bad for it. It's the fault as in if it's negative or it's positive. It's my response to it, not my reaction. That helped me, that grooms my emotional intelligence. Because I can't have a negative account that's based in my guilt, my insecurities, that fear-based, and then expect to go get something that's happy. To go get some, ooh, I'm gonna be happy. Because I'm gonna spend a high amount of interest. High interest rates just to maintain that. Look at that physical space in that thing. That moment by moment. Think about it. I said it yesterday. When you choose when to wake up and you choose when to go to bed, what are you doing between this time? It's not about you being, and my brand mentor, I was talking to him the other day. My brand mentor, he was like, you're not trying to be number one, because being number one means that there's a number 2, 3, 4, 5. That means there's always something behind it. You're trying to be the authority. You're trying to be the authority, the authentic authority within inside of your space, the authentic ownership of yourself. Being able to go into a situation and being that ultimate anti-hero. That means you're not thinking about good or bad. You're thinking about the lesson, the greater lesson that comes from that space. It's time to think about the greater lesson. That moment that I looked in that moment by moment life. And I only made points of sacrifice based upon, but my only thought process was, all I need is more. So every time, but now if I'm sitting there looking at myself and it's like every 30 days, every week, I can't break that shit down because I'm trying to look for the result. Remember I talked about it yesterday with that obsession with my job, the obsession with your job. You'll look at everything into your job just the same way you look at the positives, you look at the negatives. But in no time do you take a self-assessment of yourself. You look at every situation based on that negative account, whether it be the father, whether it be the mother, whether it be family members, whether it be your own past life regressions, whether it be your own things that you did that you haven't forgiven yourself for. That's the account that you use to create something new. I give you something to think about. Give you something real hard. If you really think about it, think about if you're in the South or your parents are from the South, and we're going to use slavery, even though slavery is not what they thought it said it was. Your grandmother, your great-grandmother and great-grandfather had one aspect of life. The more hands, the more crops, the more money. That was the standard back then with your great-great-grandmother and great-great-grandfather. The more hands, the more crops, the more money. Your mother, your father was born under that aspect. That's how. So now think about it. If your grandmother, your great-great-grandmother had those regrets, your grandmother had them regrets, and those regrets became to your mother. Now think about your mother, because that's the feminine aspect, the receptive. Think about your mother, the womb that you came through. My mother had, if your mother had the regret because she didn't get what she wanted, she got what she wanted, but she lost what she needed, the lesson, I can give you a thought process about that moral compass. The moral compass is only based in when it serves you a purpose. The moral compass is only when it serves you a purpose. Because you'll go do a bunch of negative shit that served you a purpose, but the moment that something forces you to sit down, you thinking about, that's not good for me. So it's, what is it? That same aspect or that same why is your why. That why or that thought became what the emotions that you now foster. So I'm sitting in this space. Mother got guilt, regret issues. Those are her thoughts that she formulated, created me. Oh, damn, that's why she called me an accident. She wasn't calling me an accident to the aptitude of, she wasn't calling me an accident to the aptitude of something emotional to hurt. She doesn't know how, she doesn't have the emotion, that emotional intelligence or lack thereof. She only knows, even if she's speaking it from the truest part of her heart path is blocked. So her throat chakra is blocked. So it's always going to come out that way. She can be, that's why you all, that when you think, you never understood she can't provide that clarity. So what's my purpose? Why they hit me the hardest? Because that's what my purpose was. So now I'm like, oh, she wasn't saying it to that aspect. That's why when I forgave her for all of the things that she said, that's when that space opened up. My mother's never been forgiven before. My mother doesn't understand. My mother never was truly forgiven. I go back and I look at the aspects of my life. Why every time I went to my mother's house, when I went to my parents' house, I was the only child never to go over there. And every time I go over there, it was like, I never wanted anything. Because in that aspect, using that negative that served me a purpose, I was like, I never want to go back to needing something. So every time I went over to my mother's house, until I closed out that account, I couldn't understand that aspect and move forward. Because I needed that there in order for me to keep opening accounts. I needed that there to keep this codependent manifestation going on. I needed that there to stay the card-carrying member of the Bitter Nigga Club. I needed that card. That membership gave me some nice benefits. That membership card gave me some nice benefits. I could stay emotionally relevant and not be present. I could keep going into the judgments under the state of the habeas corpus, or that's not showing up for court, and pay the fee. Because I thought that's what as long as I can keep doing what I'm doing, I'm all right. But I didn't understand how much I was stuck in reaction. I didn't understand that I'm stuck in that reaction. Every time something triggered me, I act the same exact way. I'm stuck in that aspect the same exact way. So no matter what I do in that current state, I'm still pulling from that old account. So I'm never able to embrace anything because I'm living moment to moment. I'm hurting myself. I wasn't guilty. I wasn't becoming guilty. I was already guilty. I wasn't becoming insecure. I was already insecure. I was already in that state. That's why I kept attracting those aspects. But since I saw them as obstacles based on what I wanted or what I felt I was entitled to because of what I went through, I never could accept the lesson. I was always, I'm gonna do this, and I was always stuck in that. I was always stuck. Remember, every thought got an emotion, and every emotion got a thought. I made a post earlier, my man El Cristo Necro put that in there. I was like, perfect timing. Every thought got an emotion, every emotion got a thought. Think of how many thoughts. If my thoughts are the insurance to my negative subconscious, my bank. If my subconscious is the bank and my thoughts are the $250,000 life insurance policy put out on every dollar in my account, think about how many variations I'm going to create based on feeding the emotions. See, that financial literacy is the byproduct of your emotional literacy. If you getting triggered in any way, shape, or form in that emotional aspect, that's why they tell you don't bet with your emotions. Even though you love your team, don't bet with your emotions. Don't go into the stock market scared. Don't go into any trade scared. Don't make any decisions. Don't make any decisions under emotional distress. Don't make them under that. Don't make any things under that space, because that now becomes your absolute. Remember, the emotions that whatever manifests from your emotions becomes your absolute. So think about how many things you created through emotional distress, through that emotional wound. That's your absolute. And you keep trying to set intentions on that. That goes back when I did that podcast episode about hope. That same hope aspect. You keep putting your intentions on the condition and not on your standard. So now you looking at everything from the kids is dumb. The kids ain't reading. The kids ain't reading. The kids ain't sitting down. The kids ain't listening. Don't that sound like you? What do you think that reflects? Your inner child not listening? Your inner child not being disciplined? What do you think we're projecting to your space? I keep telling you, this shit's going to challenge your humanity in ways that are going to push your limits. It has to push you to that breaking point. It has to trigger you. It has to draw blood. It has to draw blood. Because unless it draws blood, your ass ain't, the healing process can't be initiated. Unless it draws blood, ain't no healing gonna be initiated. Dawson, you remember during your consultation, that's why you always kept talking about, think about your world need to be burned down. You want to stay, remember, reaction is comfort. But reaction takes me away from accountability. Reaction takes me away from responsibility. It keeps me in a biased point. If I keep reacting based on a bias. I told y'all before, like August 16th, 2020, I was finally ready to say, you know what? Let me bring these energies together and make myself, bring that self into that, the standard of me bonding and marrying to myself. That means I'm able to go between being receptive and building. My receptive aspect, that's the generator aspect of myself. And my acknowledging, pulling shit out of nowhere and being able to think at that higher altitude, that's the manifest aspect. I'm living in the design. I now understand when I'm frustrated, I'm not in my design. So I gotta check that emotion. It's all about, that's that key. It's all right to go emotionally bankrupt. Go ahead and sign the paperwork. Go ahead and you have to accept, like, yo, that account is an account that is not suitable for me now. Or else you're just gonna keep creating variations of that same account. Think about it like this. You were used to having a bank account, but now you got a prepaid bank account card. Ain't nothing wrong with prepaid banks. It forces your ass to be humble. Ain't nothing with a prepaid bank card. It forces your ass to be humble because you only can spend what you put into it. So what does it teach you? How to manage your money, how to manage your emotions. It teaches you I need to manage my emotions in that space. Until, that's what a secure card. Think about the secure credit card. $200, $300, whatever you put on there is what you can spend. That's you learning the literacy with yourself. It don't mean put more on it. It means learning how to balance that. That's why it has a high interest rate. That's why I got that such high interest rate. If you ain't willing to spend it all, and then if you can't spend it all, remember, like, this is Harlem logic, doubling up. If I ain't got 40, that means I ain't got 40 till I got 80. I ain't got 100 till I got 200. So I can keep telling myself I got $20, but until I got $40, I only got 10. So now how do I set my boundary? Now it's that, how do I set my boundary now? Remember, that's that double up. I remember when my uncle, I want you to remember one thing. I want you to remember one thing, Nino. You don't have 100 till you got 200. Through the obsession of not understanding that, I was like, okay, cool. Always left myself overdrawn. Never could be in a sense of balance. Always in that mood. But now, still learning through the aspects of your internal work. When you're doing this shadow work, when you're doing your internal work, you understand that that's the journey. Because you're going to get to a point to where it's time to transmute. And you'll know when it's time to transmute. Because you're going to be in balance. You're going to respond to things differently. This week on the God Hour podcast, we got into just that with efficient interference, that trapped in reaction, that codependent manifest, and broken by association. Tonight, we're going to get a little bit deeper on the God Hour show. Tune in to tap out. I'm going to have the, up later. Friday night lectures. The title just came to me. Y'all heard me say Hoppus Corpus. No call, no show. We don't get into that on Friday, 8 p.m. Until then, in between time, everything from the readings, consultations, all services, facilitations, all that good stuff, hit me up in the inbox. Just set up that appointment. It's time for you to be the fucking best. And in order to initiate this healing process, it's going to take a level of honesty that's going to challenge you to your core. You accept that challenge, I promise you, I can guarantee and promise you, everything that is truly meant for you will always leave you in a state of that humility, and I'll always bring you to that. It'll help you be emotionally present. It's time to become present. It's time to become present in the present, not existing in your past, not thinking about the future. It's time to become present in the present. Time to integrate. I love you. We love us. Ashe.